You're still on mute, Michelle.
I'm talking away. Thank you. I'd like to introduce our speaker, our presenter for today. She's an amazing person, amazing woman, mother, dog lover, dog owner, rabbit owner. So her name is Denisha McClary. She's a retired government contract and fiscal law attorney. She's a certified grant writer, an author, a speaker, an entrepreneur. And Mrs. McClary, professional training includes a Bachelor of Science degree in Business Administration, a Master of Science degree in Management, a Juris Doctorate degree, and she practices law for Georgia, and she soon will be practicing for South Carolina. She has a master's degree, LLM, in government contracts and fiscal law. She is a retired veteran for U.S. Army, go Army, yay. And she also, there's a lot that she has, but I'm gonna just sum it up to this. The most important thing about our presenter today is that she is indeed, she does indeed have contracts with federal governments, state agencies, and local agencies, which makes her very unique because she has the experience to share with you on how it all works. And that's the major takeaway for you guys, because she's not just talking about it, she is also about it with the experience in writing her own, doing her own bids and estimating, and then getting contracts. She has a plethora of contracts, but she'll fill you in along the way as to all the other unique things that she does. Mrs. McClary, I'm turning it over to you.
As usual, thank you so much, Michelle, for that that very warm introduction. Welcome back, everyone who has been in either of the previous two sessions. If this is your first session, then welcome. I hope that you all have received the slides and information that's been presented from the previous two sessions. The intent of this course was to build a foundation and build upon that foundation. And so we're going to close out this session today with the information that we've started on, moving into how you actually start to formulate your bid. Now, again, just like understanding government contracts, there's a lot of information, there's a lot of terminology, there are a lot of things that, like I said, we could spend 2 hours every week for the next year talking about different aspects of this, and there would still be other things that we, could cover. So we're going to do our best in this 2-hour time frame to give you some information to help you proceed with starting to formulate, starting to understand how you bid, depending on what your industry is. Now, it would also be impossible for us to cover every industry because every industry is unique. And then depending on where you're operating your business, even within that industry, it's unique. Some industries require you to have certain government certifications and all kinds of things. And so these are all things that you would have to consider when you're formulating a bid. But because I presented in the last class a contract or a solicitation, which is, we were going through the solicitations and how you break those down and look at those. I provided in some of the materials that you received, a copy of some of all of those documents that we reviewed. We're going to use the solicitation for the Holly Hill DOT janitorial services. I said we were going to use that solicitation. I mentioned this in the last course. We were going to use that solicitation to start looking at how to formulate a bid. Again, that is for janitorial services. We did have some folks in this class who were in that industry who had already started to do homework. And I want to see, is Combat Cleaners on today? Doesn't seem like Combat Cleaners is on today. Was there someone else in the class who was in janitorial services? Ms. Jones, is that you? No? Okay, Hosea Diamond. Who else? Was there someone else?
I see in the chat there were 2 people who had janitorial services or cleaning services.
Okay, now I don't know who those 2 people are. If you guys don't mind, could you give us a thumbs up, because we'll if we were actually face to face, we could break this down and do small groups and that kind of stuff. Because we're not, I was for the previous two classes, combat cleaning had been in, and Mr. Diamond, I believe, had shared information. And one of the things that they had focused on was pricing. And so I wanted to at least start to show how we do that. We're going to use that solicitation. I'm going to give you some information that I've pulled about how that industry prices. We're going to go over that information, and then I'm going to give you some hypotheticals, but we're going to use the numbers from that solicitation to start to understand how you create a bid. Okay. So with that said, I'm going to share what it says. Oh, so it says I cannot share my screen.
Michelle, can you make Denisha, Ms. McClary a host, please? I don't see it on mine to be able to do so.
Yeah, I got it.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Michelle. So
I don't see my. Don't look like it's allowing me to allow you to be a host.
She's a host.
yeah,
Oh,
it says
no.
I'm a host. It says I'm a host. So I'm gonna share my screen now, and I'm going to where is it? So also, before we begin, in the last class, I dropped a link to a Zoom call that I had before with the Small Business Administration, one of their lending specialists, Mr. Frank Anderson out of Columbia. I tried to make that information available in the last class, did not realize that because of the way that the Zoom had been set up, you would need the Zoom, like some code to enter. I could not find that code, and rather than waste more time, I wanted to make sure I got that information out quickly. When we were sending out the slides, I went ahead and pulled that Zoom and added it to a YouTube link. That YouTube link is right here for those of you. So you'll receive these slides like you've received all the other slides. And in the other slides, I actually included this, but this link is a link to that Zoom call. Now that is a 2-hour Zoom call, kind of like how these sessions are 2 hours. And then because it was Zoom, you know how you do that administrative stuff when you're first setting up to make sure your stuff is good. So you're gonna have to fast forward to about 30 minutes in before you get to right before that call starts with Mr. Anderson. But Mr. Anderson provides some invaluable information to small businesses about resources. The information is free. Like I said, you can always go to the SBA and get that kind of information. But I just wanted to let you know that information is available for those of you who have not yet seen the information that was sent out, and who have not yet had an opportunity to go and view it. So I hope that you all will be able to appreciate that. I have other things like that I can drop on that YouTube channel. And so I'll continue to add stuff. I get a lot of questions also from clients and stuff, and I've never done this before, but I can record videos to cover specific things and add those things if anyone, if there's enough requests for that kind of stuff as well. But anyway, again, you all know who I am. This is not the first time you have seen me. If it is the first time, then if you can find out more about me and all of that stuff if you go back to the presentation that the Office of Small Business shared on their YouTube channel from last week. So we won't waste more time on that. This is our agenda for today. Remember last time we broke down the solicitation and we really went through, how to analyze it. And the reason you want to do that is because you need to figure out whether or not, we talked about how sometimes, not just sometimes, a lot of times, putting together a bid, a responsive bid to these government solicitations is resource intensive, right? It's going to take time. It's going to take money in some cases. You got to produce duplicate copies to a lot of requests, and your bid has to be submitted with the stuff that they request. And so because most of us in here are small businesses, we don't have, staff that are just sitting around with nothing to do. In fact, most of our staff is probably doing 2 or 3 jobs already within the business, and we have limited resources. So you need to be able to read a solicitation. You need to be able to go through it. You need to be able to make some preliminary decisions about whether or not you should bid on something, right? And one of the ways that you can do that is by looking at starting to formulate a way to calculate your estimate. So again, the stuff that you see highlighted in yellow here, this is really what we're going to cover. So once you do that stuff, if you decide to bid, you will format your bid. Your bid format just has to comply with the requirements that the government says in their solicitation. If they don't have any specific formatting requirements, and I say that because you have to be careful. I told you guys that I'm an attorney, right? So when attorneys write briefs, we don't just write briefs, I don't just pick the font that I like the most because I'm fond of that particular style. The court has specific rules about which font I have to use, whether or not it has to be double spaced. There are a lot of, what the margins for the page should be. And a government solicitation could contain that amount of detail. And so you really want to make sure that your bid format matches the requirements of the solicitation. But other than that, you are free to add your company markings unless they prohibit it. You are free to do those things. And then you want to make sure that you do a very good bid review before you submit, because you don't want to submit a bid that has mistakes running all through it. Because even if your bid is responsive, if there is another bid that is just as responsive, and they're just going, they don't know you from anyone, they're just going off of your bid. Think about if you were the employer or you were the person making that decision, you want a contractor that's going to come in and who is going to be professional and not make a lot of mistakes, because mistakes cost money, right? Especially on things like construction and that kind of thing, right? So if your bid has a lot of mistakes, that may send a signal to the contracting office that's making that determination that maybe they should go with another person. So you want to make sure you review your bid well before you submit. And then you want to submit in accordance, just like the solicitation tells you, you must submit. We talked about that before. Does anyone have any questions about the stuff that we're going to cover? I just went through this real quick. What we're really going to focus on is the stuff that's highlighted in yellow. Okay. So we talked about reviewing the solicitation. Remember, reviewing the solicitation is going to tell you everything that you need to formulate that responsive bid. And again, like I said, it's going to tell you what the government requires, if you need any special certifications, do you need any special security clearances, what date you're supposed to start the work, where the work has to be performed. All of those things are going to tell you what you need to start to figure out, is this bid even worth your time? If you are a small business here in the state of South Carolina, and this is a government contract that is going to start, that the government is looking for someone to start work in the next 3 months in the state of Florida. And in order to even get access to the job site, your contractors are going to need a secret security clearance, because the job site is located on a government compound where there is classified information. And so the only way you can even get access is to have certain security clearances. Should you waste your time? I'm saying waste your time, which is kind of a signal. It's kind of what we call in a courtroom as leading the witness, because I'm saying it's a waste of time. But I mean, is that really time that you want to invest into formulating and preparing a bid? If you don't have those qualifications, then probably not, right? So this is why you still want to make sure you do a good job of reviewing the solicitation. In the slides from last week, I broke down some of the most common solicitations, specifically like a federal request for proposal and a South Carolina invitation for bid. Those are some of the most complex and some of the most common for most folks who are looking to submit bids on contracts. And I told you what each one of those sections, like the heading for the section and kind of a summary of what is required in that section. So you don't have to sit and read the whole document from cover to cover, right? Because a federal solicitation can be, sometimes hundreds of pages maybe. And even the South Carolina solicitation that we saw last week, I think was like 40 something pages. A lot of small technical information, a lot of stuff, right? Some of that stuff is stuff that you, well, all of it is stuff that you need to know, but some of that stuff is not stuff that necessarily you need to know immediately to determine whether or not this is even a bid that you want to submit. So make sure those headings that were highlighted and other things relative to your specific industry, there were headings that were not highlighted on those slides, but based on your specific industry, that might be information that you need to know. So make sure you go through that with a copy of a solicitation so that you get a better understanding of how the solicitations are laid out. So you get a better understanding of how to go directly to the specific sections that are going to mean the most to you right away to start to pull out information for you to determine if you want to even continue with your bid, okay? Anyone else, anyone have any questions about anything on this slide? Now, last week I told you, like, so most of this has been a lot of information that is like giving you definitions and terms and trying to understand stuff. This week is not like that. This week is kind of, you know, there are going to be some new things that we introduce. So there are going to be some slides coming up with new terminology and things that we introduce that is going to be necessary for us to be able to go through the practical exercise. But this week is not about the slides. I think Ms. Wade said at the beginning, this week, you guys have to do some work, okay? So make sure that, and this week, unlike any other week, it's gonna be, this is the time for you to speak. If we were in class, we would be doing this in small groups to help each other work through things, okay? But because we're doing it this way, it's gonna kind of limit the amount of interaction that we can have in groups. And I did not, so anyway, we'll talk about it when we get there, but I just want to kind of let you know, give you a heads up that this is what this week is for. This week is about you taking this information and working through some calculations, okay? So, I wanted to talk to anyone who was in fact, I'm gonna go off this slide right now. Anyone who's in the janitorial field, can someone say something? Can someone? Anyone who's in the janitorial field? I know we have a few in this class.
I am.
Is that Mr. Wilson?
Yes, ma'am.
Hey, Mr. Wilson.
Hey, how are you?
I'm well. So, Mr. Wilson, do you know what production rate is?
I do not.
You don't?
I do not.
Are you
Like,
new to the janitorial field?
I do. I've had my cleaning service now 3 years, and I do have a net 15 contract, and I have a few residentials. But as far as like pricing, I was just going off of like national averages.
Okay, so tell me how you've been using the national average. What do you mean you've been going off a national average? How have you been calculating your pricing?
I was looking at pricing in like Charlotte and Charlotte and Atlanta, and I know those are bigger markets than Columbia. So I know it's a different type of money in those cities versus here in Columbia.
But when you say looking at pricing, are you talking about per square foot?
But no, it wasn't per square foot.
So how are so let's talk about this, because this is important, because when you go to clean building A versus building B, how are you distinguishing between building A and B for pricing?
Okay. Oh yes. I'm sorry. It was versus by square foot.
Okay, so you were using a per square foot price?
Not necessarily, not really a tool.
Not a tool, but I'm saying, you were saying, okay, if this one is 500 square foot and this one is 1,000 square foot, and you were saying the industry average, say in areas like Charlotte, they're charging $1 per square foot. So I'm gonna get 500 for this one and 1,000 for that one. Is that what you were doing?
Yes.
Okay, so you were charging strictly for your labor.
Yes.
Okay.
What about a lot of clients? They starting out, they provided the materials, the cleaning materials.
So they provided the cleaning materials, you charge just for the labor. Okay, so you haven't had to provide any cleaning materials?
No, ma'am.
Okay. Anyone else?
I'm also in the janitorial service as well.
Mr. Lewis?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay,
How are you?
I'm well. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thank you for asking. However, my reason for being here is because this is all totally new to me. I do heating and air for a living. I'm just getting a little older in age, you know, and the work is starting to become a little strenuous. So I figured I wanted to do something different. I figured I'd take a chance with janitorial, but I do not know the first thing about bidding. I actually, and I was speaking to Ms. Rosenthal a few days ago. How you doing, Ms. Michelle? But I also let her know as well, you know, I don't know the first thing about bidding on jobs. I don't know the type of material that I'm gonna need, you know. And my thing was I was really wanting to get more so onto the commercial side of things because from my understanding, that's where the bigger money is. I do have a contract that I messed around and got myself into with Angie's. And if anyone's familiar with Angie's, they know that Angie's is not cheap. They charging me right now roughly $300 a month, and they're getting every cent of that $300. But I'm not making anything because they have been sending the leads. You know, I get a few leads from them every month, but I've been somewhat intimidated because I don't know the business. So I haven't actually stepped out and contacted any of the customers, you know. And plus, they're just sending me residential work. I told the lady when I spoke to her initially and set everything up that, you know, I was more so interested on the, you know, for doing things on the commercial side. But everything they're sending me right now is residential. And I don't even know how to bid on those jobs. So I've been losing out on money because I've been paying them the $300 every month, but nothing's been coming in. So yes.
Okay. So this is why we want to talk about this. So Mr. Travis Wilson, Mr. Lewis, I want y'all to stay with me throughout this process. So Mr. Wilson, I want to ask you, you're charging a flat rate per square footage. You don't have any overhead with respect to supplies. What about your travel to and from the site? How are you adding that to your bill?
So I did factor in like for a further, like if I have a job in Sumter, I factor in the gas mileage for that. And I let them know in advance also. That way when they get the final invoice, there's no surprises.
Okay,
But,
so how much, so if you say you're doing it just by square foot, say it's like 500 square foot, $1 per square foot, that's $500 for that. How do you know how much you are actually making per hour? If you had to hire someone or you had to pay yourself from your business, what is the rate? How do you figure that out?
I haven't.
Right, because a 500 square foot building one building doesn't necessarily look like another, right?
No,
One of them could be all they need you to do is come in and sweep and mop. The other one might need you to strip and buff the floors, right? So there's a different labor rate. I mean, there's a different amount of labor required for each one of these things, right? Each one of these things might require sweeping and mopping, might, 500 square foot might take you 30 minutes, if you're really efficient, right? But buffing, stripping and buffing might take you several hours. But you're telling me you're charging the same rate for different work. You're strictly looking at the square footage of the building, right? So this is a common mistake that I find that a lot of folks who come to me with janitorial service, who are interested in janitorial services or who have started in janitorial services and are interested now in contracting, this is a common thing. A lot of people don't know how to price themselves. They have not been advised of how to actually calculate the pricing. So we're going to look at that in the next slide, because it's necessary to understand these things, because in order for you to not essentially lose money on contracts, like Mr. Lewis said, that he's not really making any money. Even if he's breaking even, the point of business is not just to break even, right? Because if he's breaking even, like he's bringing in $300 a month with contracts, but he's paying $300 a month for a referral service, and that's his method of advertising, then where's the money that he's supposed to pay himself with so he can pay his bills, right? It's not there. So you gotta understand these things in order for you to be profitable, whether you're doing government contracting or not. But especially if you're doing government contracting, you gotta know how to price yourself. So we're gonna talk about how you can calculate your estimate. So of course there are bid calculators and stuff that you can purchase. We talked about the fact that there were services available. You can Google them. There are all kinds of companies that sell like databases and access to, systems that will help you to be able to put information in. You just put information, raw data into it, like numbers and stuff, and it kind of helps you to formulate a bid. And you can also create your own bidding worksheets. For most of you, like Mr. Lewis and Mr. Wilson, this is probably something you could do if you have some information like the information we're going to go through today. So you could get you an Excel spreadsheet, and the information we're going to go through today, you can put this information in an Excel spreadsheet so that when somebody calls you with a job and they say that this is what the job is and this is what we want you to do, or as you're going to see when we go through the example of the government contract that we're going to look at from that DOT contract from Holly Hill, you're going to, and they offer you that walkthrough. This is the stuff you're going to be looking at when you go through the walkthrough. This is the stuff that you're going to go back. You're going to take your good notes on your walkthrough so you can go back and you can use this information to calculate your bid. All right. So in order to really calculate an effective bid for a janitorial services contract, you really have to understand what your labor costs are for every task under the contract, right? Because like we said, square footage just tells you the size of the building. That's very useful information because with that square footage information, we're going to use it to calculate what is called your production rate. But that square footage doesn't tell you that 1,000 square foot on one place and 1,000 square foot on another place could be a totally different labor, right? What is your labor cost for that specific project? Now, there's different ways to look at that. There's called a micro methodology, and that's the one that most of us are probably going to use, most small businesses. Micro just means you're looking at it from the individual task, let's say. Macro would be, okay, I've done 1,000 of these things. I have a lot of experience. And so if I get a call about, say, coming and cleaning, say, a doctor's office or a medical facility or something like that, based on my experience cleaning similar medical facilities of a similar type, I'm going to use an estimate for the whole facility, right? That's instead of looking at each individual job, because as you can imagine, the larger the job, the more time intensive it is to find out each individual labor thing if you don't have experience. But if you've been, the larger and the larger and the larger and the more and more and more experience you get, the easier that will be. So what we're going to focus on in here is a micro methodology where we're going to look at the each individual task under the contract, okay? And you're going to determine the square footage of the job. Now, where can you find the square footage of the job when we talk about government contracts?
In the bid, in the proposal, I guess. Like the
In solicitation. In the solicitation, the government will tell you the square footage of each of the spaces that they need to be cleaned, right? But does that tell you, let's say they say it's the building is, there's 3 buildings, one has a square foot of 500, one has a square foot of 797, one has a square foot of 1,300. Does that tell you, and they say that you'll have to clean and disinfect the floors? Well, you don't know what type of floors are in those buildings till you go, right? So you don't know what equipment is necessary until you go. And so that's why they also offer you the opportunity for a walkthrough, right? Something else that people commonly miss, because the solicitations just say, you're going to have to dust the window sills. You're going to have to do this. You're going to have to do that. Maybe once a month, you also have to actually clean the windows. A lot of people forget when they walk through to count the number of windows. But cleaning those windows is one of the tasks under the contract, right? And each one of these tasks is going to have a different labor cost because it takes me a lot less time maybe to clean a window than it does for me to buff floors, right? And so cleaning a window I probably won't spend 2 hours cleaning one window, where I may spend 2 hours cleaning one floor, right? So in order for you to understand how to calculate these costs, you have to look at these things. So when you're reading a solicitation and you're in a specific industry, there are certain things that should be standing out to you. If you are reading a solicitation for janitorial services, and when you get to the work required under the contract and the task, the specific task, and we're going to pull that up when we look at the Holly Hill. So we're going over this stuff now, but when you get to that, these are the things that should be standing out to you. So your wheel should be turning on these things, and you should know this going in. So when you go to that walkthrough, you're already prepared to be able to come out of that walkthrough and calculate a responsive bid or a competitive bid, okay? So here we're saying determine the square footage of the job, and then you're going to determine your production rate, right? Your production rate is essentially, how much of that can you do per hour? Because that's how you're going to determine how many hours it's going to take you to complete a specific task. Then if you are paying yourself through your business, as most of you are or probably should be, or if you are just showing, you have to calculate to them the labor cost. How much per hour are you billing for your labor? Right? So in this example, here's an example. If there's I use round numbers to make it simple, so hopefully you'll be able to understand where I'm coming from. But let's say you get a call about an industrial complex. It's 10,000 square feet that you're going to be required to clean, and the specific task or contract line item says you're going to have to sweep and mop, and it's 10,000 square feet. So we know for that task it's 10,000 square feet. Well, if for me to do the production rate for full sweeping and mopping with standard equipment, right? So you may have some high-speed thing that makes you more competitive in this market than some other folks. But for standard equipment, let's say that the estimated production rate is 2,000 square feet per hour, right? With standard equipment, which is what I have, my production rate to sweep and mop 10,000 square feet, I can do about 2,000 square feet an hour, right? So how many hours do I estimate it's going to take me to sweep and mop that whole facility in accordance with the requirements under the contract? 5 hours. So this is how I should be determining what my labor rate is for that particular line item. Now, does the contract only require me to sweep and mop the floor? Probably not, right? This is why you have to do it for each one of these line items. Does that make sense? Now, here's something else. This is information relative to the industry, not necessarily information you have to use, but this is stuff that you need to know. The stuff that's highlighted here in red, typically to be more competitive in the janitorial services thing, your rate per hour, people generally reduce their hourly rate for depending on the frequency that the contract requires you to repeat performance, right? So if I only have to sweep them out once a month, then I'm probably going to charge my average rate, right? But if they're telling me I'm getting to come 3 and 4 times a week, they want it done, once a week or twice a week, I'm going to consider how frequent that contact is with that facility and adjust my labor rates, my hourly rate for labor, so instead of saying I'm going to bill at $25 an hour because I'm only going once, if the contract says I'm coming 3 times a week, I'll bill at $18 and $19 an hour, right? That's making me more competitive in my bid. That's one of the ways that I can still pay a decent hourly wage, depending on, what you've contracted for, depending on what you've agreed to pay your employees, or the rate that you're willing to accept for yourself if you're performing this job, right? So if a bidder stays at the $25 rate and says, we're going to $25 an hour for 5 hours, and the contract says that I'm supposed to come 5 hours a week, what's the labor rate for that? 25 times 5 times 5. I need somebody to tell me.
250.
That's 250, right? So that'll be 250 for the week, right? But let's say
Okay.
the contract says we're gonna come 3 times a week. And I'm gonna, oh, no, I said that was 5, right? 5 times a week, 25 times 5 hours. I'm gonna do it 5 times a week. Now, what if a contractor, so that's your, so let's say bidder A decides I'm just gonna charge my normal $25 per hour rate. So my bid for that is 250, right? For that week. But let's say bidder B says, well, that's more than 3 times a week. So I'm gonna charge $18 an hour. So that's 25 times 5 hours times 18. What's that? Y'all gonna make me get my calculator. Y'all ain't gonna.
I think 250.
No, this is now the 250 was if it's $25 an hour and it's gonna take me 5 hours and I'm gonna do that 5 times a week. That was 250, right? But let's say I'm going to, instead of charging the $25 an hour, I'm gonna charge $18 an hour because they're giving me an opportunity to come 3 times a week. So instead of charging them at my normal $25 flat rate, so bidder A is going to calculate that at the flat rate. Bidder B, however, decides to do a reduced labor cost. So $18 an hour at 5 hours times 5 times a week is what? $18 times 5 times 5.
$90. 18 times 5.
18
Times
times 5 times 5.
That's 450. 18 times 5 is 90 times 5.
Are y'all
That's
doing this
4.
with a calculator?
450.
I'm doing it at the top of my head. It's 450
Okay. If that's 450, then how is 25 times 5 times 5 on 250?
because I only did the 25 times 5.
Oh, okay. No. I'm about to say that's not right. So 25 times 5 times 5 is what?
Well, 25 times 5 is, 125 times 5. I got
Oh,
you now.
625, right?
625.
So that's
Yeah.
625. So bidder A has calculated their labor cost at 625 because they're using just a flat $25 rate. Bidder B, on the other hand, you said has calculated their labor cost and it's at what?
450.
450. So who right now has the more competitive bid?
450.
450. So these are the things, these are the ways that make it. So I put that note that says typically to be competitive, rates go down as frequency increases. And this was an example to show you how that works. Now you determine the rates for your specific company, right? Nobody else determines that for you. So, there is a way that you can potentially price yourself out of a market, right? There's also a way where if you don't understand, what your typical industry pricing is, there's also a way that you are selling yourself short. So you want to find that sweet spot, right? We talked about the production rates themselves. There are like tables and information that give you like average production rates, right? For your industry. Most of that though is based on like experienced folks. So if you miscalculate your production rate and say it's only going to take you 5 hours, but you have a person who's inexperienced, or how sometimes if you're say you hire, unfortunately this happens a lot. Sometimes we hire our family members and friends to work for us, right? So you send your homeboy over there and he's on this, making Snapchat videos and stuff, and it ends up taking 10 hours to get that job complete. You're not gonna, because you've submitted your bid. In most cases for janitorial services and stuff like that, these are, once you submit that bid, it's not negotiable. Like once the government says this is what they're gonna pay, that's what they're gonna pay. So it's, if you get someone who can go in there and finish in 3 hours, then you've made more of a profit than you thought because you're only paying for those 3 hours of labor, right? So you want to make sure that you're very efficient when you're doing these things, but you want to understand what the average efficiency means. But if you send somebody in there and it takes them 10 hours, your company is not really making any money, right? because the government is only going to pay you for the 5 hours that you bid, right? So keep those kinds of things in mind. But does everyone understand calculating labor costs using your production rate?
I'm probably gonna need a little touch up on that as well. But I mean, considering the fact that I'm still, still learning everything. But I'm not sure if you're gonna touch up on this or if you may have during one of the first 2 sessions. But how would I go about calculating, maybe an estimate for the usage or the type of material such as a buffer, floor grinder, filter paper?
That's the next slide.
Okay.
Because your bid, that's why I was saying when I was talking to Mr. Wilson, he was talking about charging a flat rate based on square footage. Your bid, his bid was entirely based on the square footage. And that's why I also asked, well, what about your other costs? Like what are incidental costs that you have? How do you allocate those to a bid? Well, for most folks, in his case, most of the folks were providing their own material. That will not be the case for most janitorial contracts. And when we look at the Holly Hill one, we're going to see that for that one, for the first year, the government provided you were able to use the stuff that they had on hand, and they had enough that they expected it would take you through that first year of that contract. But it was a 5-year contract. So for the next 4 years, the company is expected to provide that stuff, right? So we're going to go through how you calculate those, once you know what those costs are, how you allocate that cost to this specific contract. Because if I buy a broom, I'm not just using that broom on this contract most of the time, right? Most of the time, that's just equipment that's added to my inventory, right? So there are ways to figure out, like what the service life value is of a piece of equipment, and then figure out the cost that's allocable to this specific contract, okay? And we're going to talk about that in the next slide. But does anyone have any questions about labor costs? Remember, production rates, until you are able to calculate production rates on your own, let's say you come up with an innovative way where, you've been able to be a leader in the industry, and so you can guarantee that you can beat everyone else's time by at least an hour, right? So you may have a different production rate per square hour, but there are industry standard production rates. Production rates are generally based on how difficult a project is. If it's a fairly straightforward project, then it doesn't take as long to complete. Yes, Ms. Tanner?
Hi. The example provided for labor rates for the janitorial services is great. But would you also have a brief example of labor rates for construction projects?
So labor rates for construction projects, because so labor rates are going to be based on each industry, right? And so I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll pull some examples of labor rates for construction projects, but it's still going to be based on the specific task. How each industry calculates that is still, going to be based on a specific task, because some tasks are going to be more time and labor intensive than others.
And I referenced the term labor rates, but looking at, I guess, overall costs as it relates to equipment, the use and charge of hourly rates for use of equipment.
That's what we're going to cover in the next slide. That's what I was just saying to the other gentleman. Great. Yeah, we're going to cover that in the next slide. Okay. So this is where we talk about determining your supplies, materials, and other costs, and how you allocate those to a contract. Again, it's going to, be dependent on a number of factors. You're going to look at the value of the equipment, and then you're going to look at the number of hours that you estimate you're going to use it per year. In most cases, especially where you're doing like your labor costs and stuff calculated on an hourly basis, because you're going to be able to add these additional costs to that hourly rate that you're going to assign based on the specific project, right? So in this case, you see the red stuff and see the thing in red. So as an example, let's say, we have this high speed. Now, high speed is a term that we use. I'm sorry?
Sometime today or tomorrow.
Ms. Tanner? Hello?
I'm
think
sorry,
somebody- No, I think somebody has a hot mic. I'm not sure who it is. So high speed, pardon the terminology, that's something that we military folks say sometimes. That just means that like it's a really advanced, really great industrial broom and mop set. Okay. And let's say it's so advanced that you paid $3,000 for it. Most people don't pay $3,000 for a broom and mop set, but let's say this one was so great that we paid $3,000 for it. And we estimate that it will be used about 3,000 hours per year. And so we can allocate a project cost, $3,000, the value of the thing divided by the number of hours used per year would be the hourly rate per use, right? So for each of the hours that we spend sweeping and mopping for each of these things, and we said on the previous slide, it was how many hours? Remember, 5 hours. So we can say that that particular project per hour has a $1 allocable equipment cost, right? For 5 hours, that's going to be an extra $5 per whatever the an extra $5 added to the calculation for the labor cost, right? So if we calculated our labor cost at 5 hours, if we used the $25 an hour, then we had an ultimate labor cost of $625, right? And then if we were just looking at this particular task, sweeping and mopping, and we were saying what is the allocable usage for equipment? How much of my equipment can I bill them for? I own the equipment. It's it's an investment. I didn't necessarily buy it for this project, but how do I allocate that cost to this contract? Then this is how you do it. That's an extra $5. So that's $625 now for labor plus $5 for equipment, right? For that particular project. If you're renting equipment, then you would essentially, allocate your costs based on an hourly rate to that project. There may also be other requirements under the contract. I just added this here because sometimes people forget those things. But remember, when you're going through the solicitation, you're going to be looking at all of the things that you are required to either have or provide. You're going to be determining whether or not you have those things and can provide them already, or whether you would have to go out and source those things, and what the cost would be to you to source those things, and find a way to allocate those costs to that contract. Which is why sometimes you'll easily determine, because if you're adding all of this up and once you get experience in a certain field, if you can tell right away that in order for you to be to submit a bid that would meet all of these requirements, you're already way past what a competitive bid is for your particular market based on these things, then you already know this is probably going to be for someone who has greater economies or a larger firm. And remember, these slides will go out to you too. But every industry is going to be different, and allocable costs, like the cost for some, high-speed survey equipment that you may have to have as an engineer, or even in the construction industry. All of those things, are things that will be dependent on the industry.
When you're pricing out like supplies and materials, of course I know for janitorial, it's kind of like cleaning supplies and things like that, but would you also kind of include like any, I guess, office materials that you're using, like ink, paper, pens, that kind of stuff?
Like your normal overhead type stuff? Is that
Right.
directly, you would be able, I would say only if it was directly allocable to the contract. Where you will get back most of that stuff is when you, so you know what your, we're going to talk about this on the next slide. There's usually still a markup rate. So there's a rate for labor. There's a rate that you charge to allocate equipment. And then there's still usually a markup rate. That markup rate is based on what your individual profit margins need to be for you to make the profit necessary for you to maintain your overhead and to, you know, run your business. And that's also going to be something just like your labor rates that you only, you know, that's going to be something you have to determine based on the state of your business. It'll also kind of be driven by market, you know, rates, and there are average or a typical range of markup for a specific industry. But again, this kind of class is difficult to teach in a class setting where it's a bunch of people with different backgrounds, because each of these things requires independent research in the industry. Does that make sense?
It does.
Also, there may be some costs that, you know, if the contractor, specifically if they're asking you to break it, like you typically have to sometimes provide a breakout of costs, and there may be some things that cannot be allocable to that contract, depending on the specific industry and the contract and government requirements. I didn't want to get into that in this class because you almost, hopefully, I don't know, I presume the Office of Small Business Opportunity probably has some someone or some, you know, connection to someone at the SBA that can give like a more in-depth view of accounting stuff, because there's direct and indirect cost of contracts, and there's a way that they have to be accounted for. But generally, for formulating your bid, this is all you really need to start to focus on. Now, this is the markup. So this is the difference between what it costs you to provide the service and what you charge for the service. Okay. So when we calculated labor costs and when we calculated the cost for equipment, that was just what it cost you to be able to do the service, right? If it was going to cost, if you were going to have to take 5 hours to perform this service, and your general price per hour that you either pay your employees or that you bill yourself at, or whatever the case may be, is $20 or $25 per hour, that's just what it costs you to provide the labor. And if the allocable cost for using a piece of equipment, after you break it down, you know, you add that to the contract, that really is just the cost of you being able to show up, provide the labor, and use the appropriate equipment to complete the job, right? Remember, that's really just breaking even, right? If I'm only charging you what it costs me to complete, you know, I'm charging you exactly what it costs me, I'm just breaking even, right? Well, that's why there's also generally a markup. So once you determine what your bid is in a particular case, there's generally a markup. In each industry has a standard range of markup. In janitorial services, it can be anywhere from 8 to 15 standard, and up to 50% in, you know, some areas of the market and that kind of stuff. Again, all of the stuff that you've seen and read on these previous slides, this is just information to help you with the calculation. Some of it is information like if you are in that industry, you go and you do a review, you will find information like this. But when we talked in that first and in the second class about finding your industry rates, all of these things are things that you should be able to find for your industry. Now, you still have to, you know, industry rates can be national, they can be regional, and for some things, they can also be very local. So it is important when you are working in a particular field for you to become an expert in, especially when it comes to the money. If you own the business, it's important that when it comes to industry rates that determine how much money you're going to make, that you become an expert. Okay. And that doesn't mean necessarily that you have to be the person, that may mean that you, talk to someone that offers a small business opportunity. We talked before about SCORE, which is the Service Corps of Retired Executives. And these are folks who have been in your field for years and years and years, and who have amassed a lot of experience, and who can walk you through exactly how to calculate a bid, especially if they're from your region or even your local area. They will have a lot of information about pricing. Now, and these will be people who understand it, because you may know a lot of people who are in a certain business, but just like, they may be trying to figure it out too. And they may have made money on one contract, but not really made any money on another one. They may be getting jobs, but they may not be making money. And so sometimes you have to look a little bit beyond the surface, because what really matters is, the money that you're making when you're in business, right? So this is why this kind of stuff is important. Now, I have a built-in break here. I've been told that it is okay to bypass the break unless someone needs it. Does anyone have any objection to bypassing the break and continuing on? And we can just get into the next step, which will be the practical exercise. And what we're going to do in the next step is I'm going to pull up that Holly Hill DOT contract, right? And then I'm going to give you some fictitious rates and allow you the opportunity to go through the exercises of actually learning to calculate per specific job what each of these things is. And then I'm going to tell you, okay, now that you figure that out, if you're using, we'll just give you a standard cost of allocable cost for equipment. Now calculate with this markup, with this markup, with that markup, and determine. And then at the end, I'll show you what the winning bid was for Holly Hill. Now we're not actually using the local or regional standard rates here, but looking at a bid that was awarded and looking at your own current practices, understanding now how to do production rates and all of those things, or that production rates and your labor rates will help you to determine, your labor cost under a contract and all of those things. Hopefully it will help you to start to be able to formulate a competitive pricing for your bid.
Denisha, I have a question. Would you suggest looking at things such as vertical IQ, which gives you a lot of industry information to help with pricing for business?
Yes.
Okay.
But typically, just standard practice for me, typically I always recommend to go to the SBA or SCORE, because a lot of websites, we talked about this in the first class, it came up in the second class, a lot of websites who have a lot of information like this, some of that information will be free and some of it won't, right? And so I don't ever recommend you paying for information that is free, especially because, like I said, you've already paid for information through some of these things. When the government websites that I provided before, like that where you can go and pull previous government contracts that have been awarded, so you can look at pricing information and stuff, all of that stuff is free. You can always find free resources to give you information and access to this kind of stuff through the government.
Okay.
And through government partners like the Office of Small Business Opportunity, because like I said, they have access, they have a wealth of access to people who have all of this information. They partner with the SBA, they partner with the Small Business Development Center, they partner with a bunch of other folks out in the industry, and they can bring that information into you and put you in contact with folks who can get you access to that information. So does anyone have any preference on the break? During the break, I don't normally leave. I normally stay around in case anybody has any questions, but we can move on if everyone is okay. I don't need to take a break right now. So
I think we're good. Keep moving.
All right. So now we're going to look at that Holly Hill bid and practical exercise. So I'm going to pull up the Holly Hill solicitation. And I'm going to go right. Does anyone remember which section of this solicitation that we're going to go to? This is the invitation for bid, state of South Carolina. Where do we go to find the statement of work or what the government is asking us to perform? Anybody?
DPS procurement.
I'm sorry. Oh, you mean the website? I'm saying which section of the solicitation. Does anybody remember? It was one of those that we had highlighted on the slides from before. I know you probably don't, and there's no reason to ever memorize this stuff, but I just was wondering, sometimes folks are, So this was the instruction. So it's actually going to be in section 3, the scope of work that we're going to go to for invitations for bid in South Carolina, where we're going to find out exactly what they want us to do. So if you recall on the slides that were provided from you after the last class, there was a slide for requests for proposals for the federal government, and there was a slide for invitations for bid for the state of South Carolina. And that slide told you which each section of the bid was. Section 3, the scope of work and the specifications. This is going to be what drives probably 80% of your bid, because this is exactly what they want you to do. All right. So y'all also know that I do not like to read stuff to you because you can read it yourself. I like to kind of highlight and point out things. But this is what I wanted you guys to recall. Remember that when we looked at this from before, it told us the square footage of the buildings, right? So you see that? Maintenance office, it told us there are a few buildings. There are at least 1, 2, 3 areas where they provided us with square footage. One is a maintenance office building and oil room, and they gave us a square footage, and they told us the breakdown of that space, right? Then they told us about a maintenance shop and the square footage, and they gave us the breakdown of that space. And then they told us a break room. And then they told us that the initial cleaning is what's outlined below, and it's going to be completed how often? Twice per week. So remember, we talked about there are going to be some bidders who are going to consider the fact that this is a more than one time a week that they're going to have the opportunity to go and essentially make this money, right? So they're going to probably, some of them, offer a little bit of a discount from their normal hourly rate, right? So what I did in the next slides that I'm going to put up for you is I kind of gave you a production rate that was already calculated, and for each one of these tasks, for you to figure out like what your proposed bid would be in a circumstance like that. So we see it says sweep all tile floors, all of building. Now, all of building to me would mean what? All of the maintenance office building, maybe all of the maintenance shop office, because they didn't specify, right? All of building, what does that mean? So I guess that means all of each one of the spaces where they provided square footage. If I don't know the answer to that question, if it seems ambiguous to me, what can I do? What does all of building mean? What do I do if I don't know the answer? Remember from the last class, we talked about this when you were going through the solicitation. If the solicitation fails to provide you some information that you think you need to formulate your bid, what do?
Reach out to the contracting specialist.
Yeah, you send a message in. The solicitation will also tell you if you have any questions, how you can submit those questions and the time frame, because you know at a certain point all questions cease. But also, as you recall, I'm gonna go back to the first page because we may need to just review this before we start, because there's gonna be another place where I'm gonna make reference to this. Remember that there's a site visit that was available for this, right? So remember how I said just because they give you the square footage, it doesn't mean that when it says in the bottom, when it says all building, it says, you presume that it's all every building, right? But it says specifically in section 3, when it gets to that, there's some specific language in here that indicates to me that when I go to that site visit, I need to figure out, I need to make sure I'm paying attention, because it says sweep all tile floors. So how much of these things, how much of this is tile versus carpeted versus some other thing? How do I find that out? I can ask, and they may specify, if I ask within the allotted time, and they may, and when, again, if they do that, they will post that information. They will post it as an amendment so that everyone who is bidding on this contract has the opportunity to see that information, right? But also when I go for that site visit, I want to send somebody who's experienced, because I want them to go and look at what are all the tile floors and see if they can walk it. You know, some people can walk floors and get you a good estimate for the square footage, or some people can eyeball that, like, if, you know, depending on how experienced they are. So this is some information that you might need, right? Then it says mop all floors with disinfecting solution. Well, I presume that means that all floors are moppable, but what if, you know, of this 1,152 square foot, what if only 900 square foot of this is actually, maybe, you know, what if other than 900 square foot, there's carpet? So 900 square foot of this may be uncarpeted and can be mopped, but the other one is carpet and can't be mopped. Those are things that I need to figure out when I go to the site visit, or when I'm reading the solicitation as a proposed bidder. If I have questions and they don't specify that anywhere in the solicitation, that's the kind of stuff I need to ask, right? And again, to be completed every month, dust window ledges. So you're going there twice a month. I mean, you're going there twice a week, and at least once a month, you're going to dust the window ledges. Remember, that means you need to know, it's going to say dust window blinds. You need to know how many window ledges there are, how many blinds there are, right? What equipment do you need to dust and clean window blinds? Probably just one of those feather boas, or maybe a soft cloth. But where are the blinds located? Are you going to need a ladder to get up to dust the blinds if it's in some building where the windows are, you know, 10 feet high? I mean, those are the things that you need to determine when you go through your walkthrough, right? So I saw some hands up. Mr. Lewis, did you have your hand up?
I did. I just had a quick question. I'm sorry to cut you off. I'm looking at the screen. You keep mentioning things, but I see what you're talking about. I guess for the past 3 slides, I've been saying changing. I'm still stuck on this exercise.
I can't hear you. You're breaking up.
The slide that you're currently on.
This is the solicitation.
Okay, the janitorial solicitation.
Hey,
Okay, because anything that you've been
showing is you showing your janitor consultant bid exercise with your name across? It's not showing the actual bid.
It's not.
No.
Huh. Okay. Let me stop sharing screen and reshare then. I'm just going through this thing, thinking that we're on the same page. I apologize.
You good? Because I mean, I'm like, she keeps saying she's switching slides, but I'm not seeing nothing change. So yeah, but
well, thank you so much for that, because I had no idea. Okay, so can you guys see the solicitation now?
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah,
so this is the same solicitation that went out to you in an email last week. By the way, it's the same one we looked at in class last week, right? But because now we have a little bit more information about, you know, maybe looking at rates and stuff, this is why I wanted to pull this up and kind of use this kind of like as a guide, so you could see how this stuff appears in a solicitation, so that when you're looking at the solicitation, if you already know, say, your labor rates for sweeping and mopping, right? Sweep all tiles, mop. Let's say you do that as one thing of labor, like how we had it calculated on the slide before. You know that this is something you're going to have to do. And if you're estimating in your bid what you should charge, what your labor costs are going to be for that, it says to be completed twice per week. We saw on the slide before, when we were talking about calculating labor costs, that some of the more competitive bidders will reduce their typical flat rate fee by a few dollars based on how frequently they perform that service per week, right? So there are these different ways in this industry that people kind of give themselves a competitive advantage with pricing. So what I was doing was, I apologize. I was trying to go through and show that while we were while walking through the solicitation, and so I'm so sorry that you didn't see it. But what I was saying was, you see how the solicitation, it says maintenance office building, it gives you the square foot, it gives you the square foot of 3 different areas, right? Then it says there are a total of 5 restrooms for all of the areas. You need to know that. But there's other things that you might also need to know, because remember, this is a maintenance office building. This is at the Department of Transportation. When it says there are 5 restrooms in the area, that's good to know, because down here it says clean and disinfect toilets, all restrooms. Just because there are 5 restrooms, does that mean that there are only 5 toilets? Because a lot of these buildings, the restroom will have multiple stalls, right? So there may be 5 restrooms. That may have been what they meant. Then again, they may have only meant that there are 5 stalls. You can ask that kind of stuff to the contracting officer based on the guidance given for how you submit questions, and they will publish that information as an amendment to the solicitation. Or what I was pointing out, I thought I was pointing out, and apparently I didn't have the thing up, so I apologize again. But when we went over the cover page and page 2 of this last week, we saw that for this contract, and for contracts like this is standard. There's going to be a site visit, right? So you need to make sure that you're at this site visit, because this is when you get to walk through, and all of those questions that, based on your experience for cleaning and understanding production rates now, and all of those things, that those questions, looking at section 3, which is the statement of work, or exactly what the government wants you to do, in order for you to formulate a bid that is going to be competitive, but also allow you to actually make, a profit on a contract. When you're looking at these things, because now you understand production rates, some of these things now don't seem as clear cut, right? Now it looks like, okay, I still need to know this, and I still need to know that, right? And when you go to that site visit, as we talked about, sending somebody who is experienced, because like I was pointing out here, it says dust windows, excuse me, dust blinds. If you don't go and look to see the placement of those windows, you don't know how tall those windows are. You don't know if you need a ladder to access the blinds. You don't, there's a lot of stuff that you may not know, because if this is like one of these buildings is one of those like gym type facilities that they've converted to, say, a maintenance shop. And so the windows are 10 feet high, like they are in some of those old gymnasiums, and they have blinds. What kind of equipment do you need to access those blinds? All of those things are going to impact your bid. So janitorial services contracts are fairly straightforward, I think, but there are still things that I think you have to be cognizant of that you could miss if you are not familiar with how to calculate how production rates and stuff are used to calculate your bid. Yes, Mr. Wilson, you had your hand up?
I'm done.
What?
I'm done.
Someone has a hot mic. Shaka Pope.
Sit down, Yay. Hold on. Hello?
Miss
Yes? Hello? Oh. Hello?
Can y'all hear me?
Yes, we can now.
Hello?
Yes.
Do y'all hear that?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, we just need to make sure that everyone is on mute if you're not asking a question.
Okay. You guys hear me?
Yes.
We can hear
Okay.
you.
Now,
Yes, we
Mr.
can
Pope,
hear
you
you.
had Mr. Pope, you had your hand up. You have a question?
Yeah, I do have a question.
Okay.
So I was on the this is it's not off topic, but I do have the question is, do you, before you go to the actual meeting, the site, well, not site visit, but the meeting that they have,
Site visit.
well, yeah, site visit, do you have to sign up in advance. It's like I've been looking on the website and I saw a landscaping contract for DJJ, and it's coming up. I think the visit is next week, and I know I'm still doing like my behind the scenes stuff, but I do want to sit in just so I can like get comfortable and hear see how things work. Do I have to be pre-registered?
What does the solicitation say? That's gonna be the answer to your question. Okay. Typically for site visits, they will tell you to pre-register, but they will tell you whether or not that's required. And if they do require you to pre-register, that how to pre-register and who you contact for that will be in the solicitation. If the solicitation doesn't tell you and you have questions, you're not sure if you can just show up, because let's say, like I said, in some cases, this is like on government compounds that are not open to the public or something, then the best thing to do in advance of the date is to contact the contracting officer and ask. I've read through the solicitation. I don't see whether or not, it's required, but I do know that this facility is not open to the public. And I want to make sure that if I just show up, I can just come in. In most cases, though, they will have you register.
Okay, and in order to register, all of that will be on the same.
The solicitation tells you everything you need to know.
Okay, thank you.
Ms. Tanner?
I was just going to mention that sometimes you find potential proposers or bidders that are a little not too, they're concerned about asking questions if they don't know or see the information. It's extremely important that they get their questions answered, and they're concerned about asking questions because they feel every other proposer or bidder will see what they're asking or who's asking the question. But if you submit the question directly to the contracting officer, they don't share who that question is coming from in most cases. They just provide an answer to the question, a response to the question, as you mentioned, in the form of an addendum. Because if you miss something as a bidder and don't know the answer to what you're bidding on, then that can make a determination whether you are successful or not successful. So it's always good to ask questions. Some people are embarrassed by, I don't know this or no, I don't know that, when they're reading the solicitations. But the point of the time to ask questions is through that period where they say, there's usually a cutoff period, just as you mentioned as well, to submit your questions. And you have to know everything about that bid, because if you submit a particular cost and you have the lowest bid, you're stuck with it, regardless if you included all your costs or not. So you have to live with that thing. If you did not include all costs, what it covers, then you could not make a profit and be doing work without actually making a profit. So the question and answer period is extremely important, just as you mentioned. So don't be shy. Don't be shy when it comes to asking questions.
Yeah, do not be afraid. Reach out to that contracting officer. Make sure you've completely read through the solicitation. That's why, that slide that kind of broke down the sections will help you to start to identify where to find those things at first glance. But when you first start going through these things, like they can be voluminous. It can be, it can seem like, information is hidden. I had a client contact me before someone that I know, someone who is very well educated, someone who is, I consider, an expert in their field, someone who is brilliant, but was inexperienced with government contracting, and sat and read through a solicitation and called me and said, I need help because based on, I know from the heading on this contract, this is the work that I do and this is what they want, but I cannot figure out what they're asking. I can't figure it out. And so sometimes, that's why classes like this are important. And that's why you still have to do your homework. So some of you I know have been doing that. Some of you were already pulling solicitations before this class, but it's important to go through, go to those websites, pull those solicitations, look at them, you know, make you a cheat sheet, use the slides that we provided, and figure out, you know, how to walk through these things, because in order for you to get a government contract, you have to submit a responsive bid. In order for your bid to be responsive, you know, it has to be in accordance with the solicitation. And like Ms. Tanner said, it's not, you know, some people think worst case scenario, I missed something in the contract and I didn't get the award. But an even worse scenario, even worse than not making a profit, would be taking a loss, because the government still expects you to perform when you guys have made an agreement, whether you go, you know, whether it's making your business insolvent or not. You have, you know, the contracting law is a very specific area of law. And so it's very important to understand these things, but don't be intimidated by it. Ask questions and, you know, you'll be on your way. But so this is why I thought this was a good example to go through. I am going to stop share now and go back to the practical exercise. And because I know that we will quickly run out of time. And hold on, see how I can share again. I'm going to go back to the slide, because the slides don't necessarily directly relate to the bid, but it's a way for you to understand how to start to calculate these things, how to start to figure out, you know, how to price yourself. So in this case, I took the example that we used from the first floor for sweeping and mopping. And what I did was I took the first 3 requirements under that contract, right? The first three requirements was essentially sweeping all the floor, mopping all the floors, and cleaning and disinfecting the sinks and fixtures to be cleaned, cleaning and disinfecting the toilets. Now, I put a note over here because these are the types of things that will trick you up if you're not careful on your walkthrough or asking questions. Remember, in the solicitation, it told you there were 5 bathrooms, right? But it didn't tell you whether or not there were individuals, like how many individual stalls, how many sinks, because a bathroom can have a row of sinks, right? Because there are different people, like they have a row of stalls and then they can have multiple sinks. So in this case, I just gave you some information, because that would be information that you would either find out through questioning from the contracting officer or through your walkthrough visit. And so what I've done here is given you some production values and and calculated the hours that would be necessary. And I've made up the total number of fixtures and things for you. I want to take, a few minutes to allow you guys now to calculate based on this. Let's say it was 10,000 square feet. Now we know it was a different number of square feet provided in the example, but for the sake of, this class and making the calculations easier, I've tried to use round numbers. So let's say for the first 3 tasks in the contract, you were trying to get an estimation for a bid. I'm going to give you some time to go through and estimate and do that, so you get in the habit of calculating a bid. Now, this would be for labor rates. So go through and calculate your labor rates that you would charge for these 3 things, and then we're going to walk through them. And remember, your labor rates may be different from someone else, because what you are willing to accept per hour in that industry may be different than others. So go through and let's do that. I'm going to give you guys a few minutes to work on that. And while you do that, because I don't know if it'll be helpful or not. Actually, I can't do it on this screen. I can't do a split screen on here. But if you need me to flip back to the slides that we had before where we talked about this, then let me know and I can flip back and let you look at that slide and come back to this. Remember, this is the micro value. We're looking at the specific task. So if you had to calculate a bid based on these 3 specific tasks, what would your labor rate be for these tasks? And remember, this is twice a week, remember? I'll briefly pull up the slides where we talked about calculating labor rates. So you have an opportunity to see that. And I'll go back to this slide, which is the slide that we're currently using to calculate labor rates. Okay, now most of you probably have had the opportunity to calculate your labor rates for each of these specific tasks. And again, that would be the number of hours, which is already provided to you because the production rate has been provided, and there's already in this example, we've already given you the total project, like what you would have to clean. Now, if you went back to the solicitation, it wouldn't be these round numbers. You would look at the total square foot, and if all of that square foot was included in the stuff that you needed to sweep and mop, then you would use that number based on the industry production rate, unless you already had your own production rate calculated based on experience. And based on that industry production rate, you would get your estimated number of hours per project. But here we've already given it to you, right? So here, like we said, the solicitation didn't necessarily tell us the number of sinks and fixtures, but we've given you a number just to help with the calculation, 15. And we've said that because all you're really doing with disinfecting sinks, even with COVID, is like spraying them down, giving them a good wipe out. Let's say your employee can do 10 sinks an hour, right? Can give a good wipe down, clean disinfection of sinks, 10 an hour. Then it'll take you 1.5 hours to do all 15 of those sinks. So all you're really doing is taking that hour for that particular job and multiplying it by your hourly rate. That would be your labor rate for one performance of that job. In this case, they've asked you to do it twice a week. So then you would multiply that by 2, right? So that's how much you would know you would be bidding per job on that contract. If they asked you for the yearly rate, you would then figure out, you know, okay, if I'm doing that twice a week for 4 weeks each month, and actually 4.3 is the rate that we use per weeks for the year, because of some months have longer amount of days and stuff than others. But anyway, typically use 4.3 for that. Though that's all stuff that we're not talking about in this class. But all you're really doing is taking your hours that it's going to take you to complete the job times your hourly rate, and that's going to tell you your labor rate for that particular project, right? Again, your labor rates may be different from someone else's labor rates. There may be people who say, I'm not cleaning and mopping for less than $50 an hour, right? There's probably some market where somebody is paying at least $50 an hour for that. Yes, Mr. Wilson.
Is this scale right here, can this model be used for construction and maintenance as well?
So that's what I was, Ms. Tanner asked that question, I think, earlier, about the rates that you would use for construction projects. The model can be used. The numbers and the factors may vary. For instance, construction, there's sometimes demolition costs, right?
Yes.
Before you do a demolition, there are some tasks that may need to be performed, right? So for each one of those tasks, you can figure out what all these different tasks might need to be in order to complete this demolition project. And you can figure out how many hours it takes you to complete that task. And then what is the industry rate per hour for that task. So you can really use this format or formula for almost anything, right? But depending on your industry, you know, this is what it's standard to use in janitorial contracts. Certain industries may use other things. But yeah, typically most folks are figuring out their hourly costs.
Thank you.
And so once you've done that, now we talked about, let's say you have to include I'm giving you this. Now, normally you would be figuring this stuff out based on the slides that we had before, right? But let's say you need to add an extra $12 an hour because that's your allocable equipment and supplies cost. So you figured out your labor rate, add an extra $12 an hour. It's probably pretty high in the janitorial field. But again, these are just fictitious numbers that we're using to go through the practice of understanding how to calculate a bid. Now, let's say you've determined that after your cost for labor and your cost for supplies that are allocable to that contract, let's say you have determined that for you to make an adequate profit, your markup needs to be 8%. So you take that total figure, multiply it by 8%, and add that to that estimate you initially had, and that should be closer to whatever your bid should be for those 3 projects. Because that 8% is really your profit. Because everything else was just what it cost you to do the job. And then let's say, well, 8% is, you calculate that and you look at things and that's not going to be sufficient. So now you need to mark it up 10%. You want to understand, you know, that this is why you could be doing the same thing as somebody else, offering the same services. And when you look at what your costs are and what it costs you to do the job, and then look at what it costs someone else to do the job, they might be way under you in a bid. Well, that might be because, you know, they're only billing at $12 an hour and you're billing at $20 an hour. And that is something that's entirely within your control if you are willing to accept less than $20 an hour for your work, but you have to decide how much is your time worth, right? And the same thing is true for your markup. You are going to be making these calculations to determine what your final bid should be. Markups are generally expressed as a percentage instead of like a flat fee. So it's generally like let's say, in fact, Mr. Wilson, what did you get for just your labor cost for these 3 projects initially?
Say that again, please.
When you went through this exercise, what did you get for labor costs for these 3 tasks?
Which 3 tasks?
For the first one, the 5 hours for the sweeping and mopping, your labor cost for that task. Because remember, you could have done the $25 an hour, you could have done a $50 per hour, you could have done whatever, you know. What did you get for your?
I was taking notes. I'm sorry.
Okay. I saw you writing, so I thought you were calculating. I didn't mean to put you on the spot. But again, remember, this part of the class is y'all's turn to do the work. I'm not sitting here making calculations or giving you model answers, because really there is no model answer. Really, these things are dependent upon the rates that you set. Yes, Mr. Lewis?
Look, listen. Honestly, I'm still kind of lost in this area right here, to be honest with you. And had I caught the first 2 sessions, I probably would have been dead on where I needed to be at.
Okay.
But I mean, I can give it a try if you like.
Please, yeah, let's talk about it.
Because basically all I did was just I did a $20 hour figure for 5 hours, which gave me the $100 for the 5 hours, and then I tagged on if I could remember what. Okay, I also tagged on the I lost the exercise. There it is. The estimated amount of time for sweeping, which was 1.5, sweeping and mopping the floors, as well as the disinfecting of the toilets, and I got an additional 35. So I did I mean, I guess my total would have been like what, 135 for the job itself.
135 for the job for one time, right? But
For
they
one
want,
time,
they-
correct.
but they're saying twice a week. If you go back to the solicitation, I can pull it up again. So then for that particular bid for that job for twice a week would be 135 times 2.
Right.
Okay.
Well, yeah. So yeah, I think it's right on the head. So we're looking at what, 270?
270. All right. So before you had gone through this exercise, how would you have started to price a job where it was a 10,000 square feet of sweeping and mopping and cleaning down bathrooms?
Right.
So the only way to know how much this is even really costing you is to figure out what your time is worth per hour, right? And how many hours
Correct.
you're spending on the job. So
Right.
so when they talk about industry standards for cleaning, you know, that may equate to, say this is 10,000 square feet, you said 100. So when they break that down, that may equate to, you know, breaking this calculation all the way down. But if you are only considering your labor costs, so that was labor, then you had to tack on the additional $12 per hour. So for the 5, 6, 7, 8 hours, 8.5 hours, that additional $12 for those allocable equipment costs and supplies costs.
So I got the 195 after I added everything up. And that was just for the one job, for the one time, actually, not times 2.
Okay. Now, again, this might seem inflated because these are fictitious numbers. So $12 an hour additional allocable cost for a janitorial contract, for a small janitorial contract may be a lot, right? This may be production rate for 2,000 square foot, 5 hours just to sweep and mop, 10,000 square foot. That might be a very low production rate. Low production rates normally happen where the job requires a lot of complexity. If something is simple, like wiping things down, normally the production rate is high. You can do a lot of it, and you can get it over with. So again, these are fictitious numbers. Remember, production rates can be determined. These are industry standards. You can pull production rates, and they can say, okay, for a job of 3,000 square foot for this kind of task, the production rate is normally 4,000 square foot per hour. You can pull that kind of stuff and add it into your equation, but you just needed to understand how to calculate, how to use that information. Because even if I had given you that information, if you didn't know how to use it, it wouldn't really help you. But this is how you should start to think about pricing when you see stuff. And then if your bid stops there for the cost of the equipment, the cost of your labor, if you are, say, an LLC and you're going to pay yourself for the cost of that, your company is going to cut you a check because you did the work, right? Then what money does the company have for overhead and continuing operation? That is going to be dependent on what you make on your markup. Again, markups, like I said on this slide, hold on. Like I said on this slide, for markups are also something that you should research, and you should talk to other people in your industry, because markups are based on industry. Ms. Wilson?
So for the let me see, the labor rate, I wrote down the equation as the number of hours times the hourly rate. Is that right?
The labor rate, the number of hours times the hourly rate, correct.
Okay. And then for the production rate, you said it can be like the industry standard, but that's one that we would have to research. It's not like a specific
It is one that
for it.
It is one that you can calculate. If you, let's say, like I said, once you get experience, you can calculate a production rate that might be specific to the services that you're offering. Production rate just means for this for whatever this total job is, or for let's say, even if we break the job down, let's say I am able to read 10 books a month, right? There are 30 days in a month. So how many books am I, it's going to be a fraction, but how many books am I reading per day? Your production rate is just how long it takes you to complete a certain size job. Then if you know the size of the job that you're trying to complete, you would just say, okay, for this size of a job, so if I know I can complete, let's say I know I can build 1,000 square foot building in 10 days, right? And let's say I have somebody offers me a contract to build a 1,000 square foot building, then I know that I'm going to be able to do that in 10 days, right? If you had to bill for that per day or per hour, then what would your daily rate be that you charge per day or per hour for those 10 days to adequately cover the time that someone has to spend on that project? So you may be able to calculate production rate if you have experience, but you don't need to necessarily have your own calculation for production rates especially when you're first starting out. These are things that you can you can research, because I did find like a chart almost for average production rates for janitorial services based on square footage, but production rates are also based on complexity. So just like 500 square foot in one building is not going to be equivalent to 500 square foot in another building, because the work I may be required to do may be different. Because if I have to buff and mop the 500 square foot versus just, strip and buff versus just sweeping and mopping, that's a different, one is more labor intensive. So I can't be expected to complete those in the same amount of time. Mr. Lewis.
I'm sorry.
Yes,
So
ma'am.
the production rate is the amount of time that it takes to complete the job. It's like the ratio of the amount of time that it takes to complete the job divided by the amount of time that you have to actually complete that job.
Not the amount of time that you have, but what's standard in the industry for that type of thing or what it actually takes you to complete the job. If you know how long that is. If you don't know, then you can use what's standard for that type of thing.
Thank you for clarifying that. I appreciate you. I hadn't had my green tea yet, so my wheels still turning in the brain.
Oh, my pleasure, my pleasure. Mr. Lewis?
Yes, ma'am.
Your hand is up. I
Oh,
didn't
no,
know if you
no.
had.
I think my hand's been up since the first time I raised it, when you spoke to me earlier.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Well, I think sometimes you pop back up to the top of my screen, and so when other people are talking, you go. So it looks like you keep popping up. Okay. Well, again, this part of this course was for you guys to go through this exercise so that you started to make a correlation between the time that you spend on jobs and the square footage, to understand how these things can work and how you must consider all of your costs that are directly allocable to that specific project to determine whether or not you're even making a profit, to determine whether or not you're even breaking even. Because unfortunately, a lot of small businesses, like let's say, I got into this business just kind of by happenstance, but now I'm just going to run with it. And I already own a vacuum cleaner. There's wear and tear and depreciation that happens to your equipment. That equipment eventually is going to need to be replaced. If you don't know how to include essentially the rental fee for that company every time you take that vacuum cleaner to their place to clean, then you're not being compensated for that. So that out of pocket, so when that thing breaks down or needs service or whatever, it's going to come out of your pocket. And if you're already only charging them essentially what it costs you to show up and do the work, you're already not really making any money. So think about these things. And we're right at 12 o'clock. So I'll conclude, because I know we've been going over for the last few weeks. But this concludes my presentation, and it concludes the third part of this series. Thank you so much to the Office of Small Business Opportunity for allowing me to come in and interface with your students and your business owners and these entrepreneurs. I really appreciate it. I really am passionate about this kind of stuff, which is why I do it myself as a consultant, in addition to just being a business owner who's out here doing government contracting. So thank you guys so much. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I have one question before you go. She's gone. Man.
Mr. Lewis, I think you have
Yes.
a question. Go ahead before we close out.
Well, I was just wanting to know if Ms. McCleary offered any, one-on-one, or if it was possible, maybe schedule an appointment or a meeting or something to maybe meet with her again.
I do offer one-on-one appointments. My books are currently closed until March, unfortunately. So I don't know how soon you would like to meet. And I know we're just about to enter February. February is a short month, and I'm sure it's going to go by fast, but my books are closed until March because I am in the process of trying to study and sit for the South Carolina bar. And I also, have government contracts like this one that I'm wrapping up, and other employment requirements. So, and other clients as well. So I'm a little booked now through March, but anytime after that, I would be happy. You can go to, when you see the slides, I don't know if you've been getting the slides from the previous two sessions, but these slides, like those slides, will be available. It has my website information and that kind of stuff. You can always reach out to me on my website, and we can go from there.
Okay, that sounds good. Do you happen, just by chance, would you happen to have anything you might be able to just throw out there for, someone trying to get into the industry and, trying to just learn some new things?
Into government contracting?
Yes.
I do offer private seminars, and again, like I said, when we opened on, I just dropped some videos on a YouTube channel that I had that I wasn't really using, that I shared a video with the class last time. I tried to share it from the Zoom, but they could not access it from the Zoom. So I downloaded it from Zoom and put it on a YouTube channel. And it was a seminar with the Small Business Administration, because I do partner with the Small Business Administration, the Small Business Development Center. I'm in Georgetown County, South Carolina. There is a Georgetown Innovation Center, which is a small business incubator here that provides free training and incubator space to small businesses. And I've partnered with them to do stuff. They're partially funded by the Bunnell Foundation, because they're another resource like the SBA. So I also have done events with SCORE. So I do a lot of things where I can to help support and train and provide information to other small businesses. I'm a veteran. I'm 100% disabled veteran, retired Army, and I'm very passionate about helping veteran-owned businesses. I'm very passionate about, of course, helping people like myself, women-owned businesses, minority-owned businesses. So these are things that I'm passionate about. So I try to get engaged in things like that. And so I do offer private seminars. If you go to my website and put your, go to and click the link and put your information in, I send out updates and stuff to people who sign up for those on the website about when we're having seminars, when we're having all kind of other things. So
that sounds good. And where can I find this YouTube channel?
I'll drop the link in here, but it's also going to be on the slides. It was on the slides that went out last week, and it's going to be on the slides that go out this week, because it has that link that's on that slide is the link directly to the video with the Small Business Administration. So I'll drop that here for you.
Okay, all right. Okay, well, listen, I'm still lost in a lot of areas.
Uh-oh, I think he dropped, Mr. Lewis, I think he dropped off. Like Ms. McClary said, we will go.
Sorry. I'm sorry. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
I just put the YouTube link in the chat, by the way.
Thank you.
Please, like I said before, y'all, because I downloaded that from Zoom, like if Miss Wade were to upload this entire video to their website, to their YouTube page, you would see, before we get on here a few minutes before, to make sure audio and everything is good. My husband was in here running his mouth with her because they both went to Benedict. And so you would see all of this behind the scenes stuff, which unfortunately you'll see in this video, but there's nothing behind. It's just me at the computer. So please fast forward to about 30 minutes. And it's a 2-hour seminar by Mr. Frank Anderson, who is a small business administration lending specialist out of Columbia, who has done a few events for me here in my area of South Carolina. And I think it's a great seminar. SBA is a great resource. Office of Small Business Opportunity is a great resource. So I just wanted to pass it along.
And once again, Ms. McClary, once you send us the slides for this week, we will go ahead and attach all 3 weeks and send it on to you. Also, this workshop today is being recorded, so we will upload it to our website, to our Richland County YouTube channel, so you can go back and watch it. And hopefully, Mr. Lewis, with seeing it again, there might be some things you probably didn't catch at the time. You'll probably be able to catch it when you can watch it and slow it down and rewind it. And also, we will send the slides for the last 2 classes to you, to everybody also. Ms. McClary,
thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Thank you to all our business owners that have been with us throughout this entire workshop, even to the ones that jumped on for the first time today. I know it was a lot of knowledge that Ms. McClary dropped in there with us. Again, we will post her website on how to get in contact with Ms. McClary to connect with her after March. I think she said she'll be available. In the meantime, if there's any other information or if you need any resources from our office, the Office of Small Business Opportunity, we'll be on hand and willing to assist in any way possible. Our phone number, 803-576-1540, or you can drop any questions that you may have had to osbo@richlandcountysc.gov. I just want to say thank you to everybody. Thank you, Ms. McClary. Thank you to the OSBO team for making this workshop a success. Remember, February the 3rd, I think that's next Wednesday or Thursday, will be our next workshop. We'll be talking about how to do a business plan. I encourage you to sign up for it. It's out. If you need more information, contact our office and we'll let you know exactly how to sign up. Ms. Green Swinton, did you want to add anything in before we get off the live?
Once again, thank you to Ms. McClary for the great information and the hands-on solicitation to actually work through. I feel as though that was really, really meaty. And I think a lot of us, I could see that everybody's trying to work through how to figure out those production rates, labor rates. Just want to add that, just a reminder, if you're wanting to set up an appointment as it relates to becoming a small local business enterprise with our office, if you will, please just contact our office and we'll be more than happy to walk you through the process of being able to be certified as an SLBE with Richland County. But thank you all for sharing your Saturday with each of us. And we hope you've gotten a lot of great information out of this today, and we'll use the resources as needed. Thanks, Erica.
All right, thank you. And have an awesome day.
All right, just a reminder. I have a reminder about the survey. There will be a survey that's included in your email. Please click on, it's done through Survey Monkey. Click on it and complete it. It will help us on how to better serve you as small business owners. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hang in there, Denisha, don't hang up.
Ms. McClary, you are the host, so you can stop record.